Hello, everyone. Welcome back to, I guess this is another vlog. Trying something new here. Trying to maybe start a new series on my personal gaming history, video gaming and computer gaming in general. Um, gonna probably go console by console. Like each episode, I guess if you want to call it, will be me talking about a particular console that I have owned, um, that I may still own as well. And we're gonna go off just the in order of how I own these consoles. Like, we're gonna start off with the Atari 2600. The first system I actually played, I believe, was the NES, but I owned a 2600 before I got a Nintendo Entertainment System. So played the NES, really liked it. Started saving money to eventually purchase one. I think I ended up like saving about $80, and my parents basically helped pay for the rest of it. But in the meantime, in the time between when I started saving and when I actually got a Nintendo, um, my grandparents had my uncle's Atari 2600 in storage, and they basically took it out of storage and sent it to me with few controllers. Like, so I think like two of the joystick controllers, and I think a couple paddles as well, and a bunch of games. So I think I remember playing the NES back in, I think it was like maybe May or June, and I got the NES in October of 1988. So for a few months in between there, I had a 2600. Eventually, we had to get rid of it because it broke. I managed to save a couple of the games, so I still have, I think, like Kaboom, Raiders of the Lost Ark, I think Space Invaders, and that's about it. No controllers anymore because a lot of that stuff just got taken out when he got rid of it because it just stopped working at one point. Which I think it had definitely had a long life. I don't know when my uncle got it, but definitely like early '80s. And then we had it until I want to say like 19. I think 1992 is when it actually broke. But the majority of my time playing it was in the summer of 1988. And just wrote some quick notes down here. So, yeah, so grandparents gave it to me. I remember getting, I think the games they sent me were Space Invaders, Kaboom, Pac Man, Missile Command, Combat, a bunch of the catalogs that you would get with games. And the catalogs were just really cool because the artwork on the catalogs was really cool. It was basically just a list of other games that you could get on the 2600. And again, with great artwork. I remember seeing in there the basic programming game and how it had this weird controller. It was the keyboard controller. I never actually had the keyboard controller, but you would use it to. There was a basic programming game for it. There were a few other games that used the keyboard controllers, but I think it was a smaller, much smaller set of games that used those controllers. But we got the system. I remember playing it with my sister, not having any idea of how what the object of a lot of these games were, because a lot of games had multiple game like modes. Because on the 2600, we had the one that was the wood grained one that had the dip switches to switch between. I guess some of it is difficulty settings, some of it is like game type settings. I was never exactly sure exactly like what setting did what, but we remember like playing Space Invaders on that, playing combat games like that. Really like Missile Command on there. Pac-Man, it was like not a great port, but it was functional. It was fun. Definitely not as good as the arcade version or some of the other like ports that eventually came out for Pac-Man. But basically, the 2600 allow you to bring some of these arcade games home. So Space Invaders, Missile Command, and whatnot. I think maybe um, like a year after I got the system, I had an NES at that point. But my friends also had an NES, and they also had a 2600 that was their 2600 was broken. So they gave me their broken 2600 and basically said, if you can get it to work, you can have it. Or if you basically you get it to work, you can keep it. They gave me all their games as well. I never got their system to work, but I was able to keep all their games because at that point they had nothing to play, nothing to play them on. Their system was broken, and I still had a functional 2600. So this, I think I got a lot more games from them than I did initially. I remember getting a port of Donkey Kong on the 2600. They had the Journey Escape game. They had another controller that was um, it was basically the same joystick controller, so like joystick one button, but it was a much larger joystick and a much bigger button. I don't know if it was like a third party thing, if it was an Atari thing, I don't remember exactly. But got that, got Raiders of the Lost Ark from them, and a bunch of other stuff. Raiders of the Lost Ark is still. I had no idea until a few years ago of like what you were actually supposed to do in the game. I remember I would always like grab the whip and just fall, and then you would get touched by a snake and die basically. Um, I saw a YouTube video on how to basically what you were supposed to do. And it's like, oh, okay, cool. I had another friend that I think I let borrow an NES game in exchange to borrow, like it was like for like a week, borrow ET, generally regarded as one of the worst games of all time. I remember playing that, having no idea what I was supposed to do. But when years later, I think it was in an EGM article stating like their worst games of all time, and that was at the top of the list. So I was like, oh, I played that. So I have officially on official actual hardware played the worst game of all time. Um, Not a good game, but it was. I remember that is an experience that I had with that game. What else do we have here? So yeah, they give me that 2600. The system broke. Another interesting thing is this isn't exactly on the 2600, but it relates to the PlayStation 2. There was the Activision Anthology, which I own on PlayStation 2, and it was a large collection of I don't know if it's every single Activision 2600 game, but quite a few of them. A couple of them, like Kaboom and I think Keystone Capers, I actually did own on the actual console. Keystone Capers was really fun as well. But the Activision Anthology was just really interesting because it was a large collection of these games. Had a great '80s soundtrack. I remember having it like having Blondie on. It was had Blondie, Aha, Take on Me was on the soundtrack. Twisted Sister, We're Not Gonna Take It, and just a nice '80s playlist, as well as a bunch of really cool unlockables in the game that you would get if you got a certain score or beat a certain score in a game. You might get the video of the original commercial for a particular game. I think like ice hockey was one where if you do a certain achievement basically, or this is before achievements were a thing, but you would do something in the game, you would unlock the commercial. There were also various gameplay like adjustments that you could do. I think if you like got a score like got to a certain thing, you did a certain score, did some kind of achievement, you would get these things that would affect the actual like display of the game to make it more challenging. There were some where it would play the game on like I believe it was like a rotating cube. So you'd have this cube, and the cube would have obviously like its six sides, and on the six sides would be the actual like game that you were playing. So you this cube would be rotating, and you would be trying to play the game as it was rotating. There were a bunch of other like cool options like that as well. So generally, get a high score in this game to unlock these weird visual like distorting things that make the game harder or more challenging. There were patches you could get, so much like the patches they did, certain game companies did in the '80s, where like if you got a high score, you basically like would have to send a picture of your score into them, and they would send you these patches. But those patches are also available in this game as well. So again, like I think like barnstorming was one. I believe I actually owned barnstorming. I wish I had that stuff still. Again, like I said, I managed to save a few things before they got thrown out, but it's only like a very like a fraction of what I used to have. But kind of the 2600 was my like I want to say like the NES was my the first console I played that I really wanted, and the first console that I really like had a lot of time with was the 2600. So I definitely like look back on those times as being fun. They were brief, definitely brief compared to um, like the amount of time I put in on the Nintendo and Super Nintendo and Nintendo 64 and PlayStation 2 and so on. But it was still a really fun time. Um, I'm probably gonna do more of these videos. The next one I'll do, not sure if it's gonna be like a once a week thing, will be for the NES. That'll probably be a much more in depth video as I definitely had a lot more, not a lot more games because I definitely had a lot of 2600 games, but there were some where I just didn't know what I was supposed to do and they just weren't great. But anyway, had more time with the NES. I still own my NES. It's been a while since I've actually physically like played on the NES. I've played some virtual console stuff on. I think like I got my Wii put it like hooked back up, and I still have some virtual console stuff on there. Um, then there's some stuff on the Switch. The Switch has the NES Classic, so I've been playing some of those. But definitely had more time with the NES. So this episode was about the 2600. I'm going to be doing an episode on the NES next. Where we're going to basically discuss the same things like how I got into it, what my favorite like games were, and so on. So Hopefully, this is something you guys like. If you do, let me know in the comments below. But that's going to do it for now. Remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Take care.